Good evening. Allergies wrapping you guys up like most of my family is right now. We had, you guys know Adam Perry. He works for the counties. Remember the church over at Perrytown? He'd taken so much Benadryl this past Saturday, I was worried we'd see him or not Sunday morning if he'd be able to get out of the bed. I know the shelves are just about empty of that kind of stuff right now. But all three of my girls seem to be allergied up right now. It's a terrible, terrible thing. It'll all be over in another month and a half or two. If we're lucky. Most of you know, I visited with Miss Tommy Jo yesterday evening, a little while before the mosquitoes ran us off. She's been diagnosed with leukemia and is in isolation, complete isolation from folks. So we visited from afar, but she's in that process of testing and visiting doctors and oncologists and such, and so they're in that phase where they don't know exactly what they're going to do yet. They're trying to make sure she's strong enough for whatever treatment they're going to do, doing blood tests and things like that. But she definitely needs our prayers, and the family does. It's Sam's not all that strong either right now, and then trying to be isolated yet have family help you get around to doctor's appointments and things like that. It's a difficult time. Most of you are well aware of that, but keep her and them and your family as well. The front pew is open. I can clip it on my nose, I guess. Let's see. Let me move it up here. I did order a new microphone. It's supposed to be here tomorrow. We'll see. It's supposed to be brighter and better. The audio tech guru I worked with said that's what we needed. Okay. We'll put Braille on the screen. We are in 1 Samuel chapter 22. David is a full-blown fugitive now. He is on the run from the law. As it were, King Saul, he is on the run. Now, Saul has thrown a spear at him a few times now. It has gotten so bad that Saul has thrown the spear at his son as well, at Jonathan, at the dinner table. We concluded a few things. One, Saul is on the edge of madness, and two, he's not very good with a spear. So they're very fortunate. David has ran at the end of chapter 1. In fact, to flee Saul, he actually fled to the Philistines, to the city of Gath. And it kind of dawned on him once he got there and people began recognizing that might not have been a good idea. So he started acting like he was a madman. He started drooling all over himself and doing bizarre things, odd behavior. And some of the people went and told the king there of Gath that David was there and how he was acting. He said, I got plenty of madmen around me. I don't need another one, kind of a deal. So David was able to escape. So in chapter 22, verse 1, that's where we pick up, is David fleeing Gath. So David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. All right, let's get orientated here, geographically speaking. Gath, over here. I don't have my pointer. I need to bring it back over. I borrowed it, and then I forgot to bring it back. For the most part, I think I can step over. I'll probably get off camera, but it'll be all right. The coastal plain over here, right off the Great Sea, the Mediterranean. I don't know if you can make it out or not on the map, but it is green shade over here, and that's flat ground. That's coastal plains. One of the greatest trade routes, and I don't know if you can see this line right here. Now, the greatest trade routes through Israel is right there. Trade coming from Egypt and from Africa up. Most of it's going to travel up that trade route, which the Philistines control. It breaks through and turns and goes through the Jezreel Valley to head back towards Babylon, that direction. But the Philistines control some of the richest land during this time period. So David has fled over to Gath. You have Jerusalem over there to the east. You can see it's almost even with the top of the Dead Sea over there. Nob is just above Jerusalem, not far at all, just right there by it. The other cities we're familiar with, Gibeah and Ramah. But David has fled Gath and come upon the cave of Adullam, which is just where the mountains begin, and that's where Israel's control begins as well. David is just kind of getting out of the Philistines' territory, getting over into the Israelite-controlled territory where it starts getting hilly, a little bit mountainous there, and he's found this cave. It's the cave of Adullam. It just so happens we know where that cave is, and that's it. If you can make it out in the background, there's a highway. Now, this is modern Israel back there in the background, but there's a highway kind of splitting straight up the center of the screen there, the valley down below the mountain there. But that is the cave right there, Cave of Adullam. You get down inside of it, and there's a little bit more underneath than there is outside of it. It's actually a pretty good system of caves right there that are connected. Room enough even for agricultural purposes. The stone there in the bottom of the picture there, it looks kind of like a donut, got a square pegged hole in the center of it. That's an olive press stone. Now you can remember back with me to our study of Judges. The Philistines had begun raiding various other nations, but in this area it would have been the Philistines raiding farms and such. They had to retreat. They had to start doing their agricultural things below ground, hiding, so that they could keep the wares of their labor. So threshing was done below ground level, pressing olives as well, try to do that out of sight. So we have here the remains, and even where the gentleman's standing back there, you can see the square cut stones back there as part of what's left over, probably from the olive press as well with the pressed stone. And so this cave is, it's a popular place, but it's a good place for David to flee to. Now, probably a good bit of this stuff happened after David. Probably when David was there, it was just just the hole in the ground there. It didn't have all of the nice, press stuff in there yet. So David's got him a hiding spot. In verse 2, and everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul gathered to him. And he became commander over them. And there were with him about 400 men. You kind of see what's happening here. Word has gotten out. His dad, his brothers come for a visit. People are finding out that David's here. Obviously not Saul, or not yet. That's probably a fear, though. And he's got folks gathering around him, kind of like Jephthah. You remember Jephthah, the judge? And he had a band of worthless fellows that kind of gathered around him, and they sort of become this ragtag militia type force. And here you have David with 400 folks who have gathered around him of just various backgrounds. These are outcasts. They're people, the fringes of society kind of folks here. They're in distress and debt, bitter in soul. These are folks on the run, maybe even slightly anarchist or something like that. They may be anti-Saul folks, here. But he's gathered up a sizable force here. So in verse 3, David went from there to Mizpah of Moab. He said to the king of Moab, please let my father and my mother stay with you till I know what God will do for me. David's not content to let mom and dad hang out with him. He wants to get them somewhere safe, somewhere out of Israel. We don't know where Mizpah of Moab is. Moab is on the other side of the Dead Sea. It's on the other bank of the Dead Sea, about middle ground somewhere in there. Can you tell me? This is your Bible trivia question for the night right here. What tie does David have to Moab? What tie does David have to Moab? Why would he flee here? Anyone? Somebody with study a Bible probably could find the answer real quick. It's probably in the notes. I don't know. Who was David's daddy? Jesse. Who was Jesse's daddy? Obed. Who was Obed's daddy? Boaz. Who was Boaz's wife? Ruth. You're all around it back there now. shooting buckshot. You're getting all in there with it. But Ruth the Moabite woman, yeah. David's great-grandmother, just great-grandmother was a Moabite. It means his great-great-grandfather is a Moabite, which means David has lineage. He has Moabite blood. He has a place, a plot there in Moab. He has a legal right to be there, being the offspring of a Moabite woman. So there you go. So he's got this tie to Moab. I even had it on a slide here. I was going to flesh it on out there. But there you have it. You can find this actually in the lineages of Jesus because, well, they're in the genealogy of Jesus. Both Matthew and Luke, you can find these names. So you can see right close how far apart these are. Pretty interesting, though, because when you think about Ruth and where it is in the text versus what we're studying now, you would think there's generations and generations and generations between David and Ruth. There's not much time at all between the two. Not much time. Okay, back to 1 Samuel. We have Saul who is frustrated. David's been on the run. He can't catch him. No one is helping him out. And he calls folks to himself. He's sitting under a tamarisk tree. He wants a witness, and he's calling for people. I need somebody to tell me something. How did none of you know nothing? I used a double negative. It sounded bad when it was coming out, but there it is. Then answered Doeg the Edomite, who stood by the servants of Saul. I saw the son of Jesse come into Nob to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, and he inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. That's just what Saul wanted to hear, right? His priest has fed David, his enemy, and gave him a sword. And not just any sword, the sword of his other enemies, the Philistines, the Goliath of all people. Ahimelech is called to the king. Saul questions him. In verse 14, Ahimelech answered the king, and who among all your servants is so faithful as David, who is the king's son-in-law, captain over your bodyguard, and honored in your house? Is today the first time I've inquired of God for him? No. Let not the king impute anything to his servant or to all the house of my father, for your servant has known nothing of all this, much or little. All right, so the first part, verse 14, Ahimelech does something similar to what Jonathan does. He lays out, wait a minute, Dave's an honorable guy. It's what Jonathan did to Saul the first time he convinced him not to kill him, right? He's done nothing but bring honor to the king. He's done nothing but bring honor to Israel. He's done all these great things. Why would I not help him? You know, why would I not? He's your son-in-law. He sits at your table, right? He's captain over your bodyguard, honored in your house. Yeah, I help him. And today, is today the first time? It's a rhetorical question, right? It's today the first time I've inquired of God for him. David would go to the priest, to the high priest, to inquire about battles, right? Before he would go into these wars with Philistines, these various skirmishes, he would go to the high priest. The high priest, wearing the linen ephod, would cast the Urim and Thummim to ask questions of God, to see whether David should go or should not go, that sort of thing. We're going to see that some more. And so, the priest has helped David. And it's normal. It's just something we do. And so, Ahimelech answers there in verse 15, let not the king impute anything to his servant or to all the house of my father. Your servant has known nothing of all this. Much or, I didn't know there was tension, friction between you. I didn't know you were chasing him. Didn't know he was wanted. Anything like that, So, why would I not? Why would you punish me? And so, the king's response, Saul's response here in 16 is much like we expect it to be. The king said, you shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house. And the king said to the guard who stood about him, turn and kill the priest of the Lord, because their hand also was with David. And they knew that he fled and did not disclose it to me. But the servants of the king would not put out their hand to strike the priest of the Lord. Okay, we're seeing some things happening here. Saul has done some pretty bad things already. You know, he's tried to kill David, throwing a spear at him. He's thrown a spear at Jonathan, whether it was with intent to kill him or let him know that he was upset. I don't know. Yeah, probably. You know, don't know. I'm not going to try to get in his head. But now he is seeking to have priests of God put to death. That's far worse, right, than anything he has done so far. We're going to compare that to something else here in just a moment as we get a little further through the text here. Here we have Doeg again. I've been calling him Doeg. You know, we usually just say Doug. You know, pretty sure there wasn't a Hebrew named Doug, but King said to Doeg, "You turn and strike the priest." And Doeg the Edomite turned and struck down the priest. And he killed on that day 85 persons who wore the linen ephod. Now you remember the ephod. This is the priestly garment. It's a vest. It's very ornate, very expensive. Gold threads, all this sort of thing in there. The pockets that hold the Urim and the Thummim as well. He's killed 85 priests of God. We haven't heard anything bad, corrupt, or anything about these guys. The only fault that we know of is the fault that Saul perceives that they are against him because Amalek aided David. And Nob, the city of the priest, he put to the sword both man, woman, child, infant, ox, donkey, sheep. He put to the sword. Here is where we come full circle and Saul's decline or his degradation. Do you remember what the great sin was that he committed, that God spoke to Samuel and Samuel had to go speak to Saul and tell him that his kingdom is going to be torn away from him and that he was going to be replaced on the throne by someone better than him? Do you remember what that sin was?
He didn't kill all the people and animals of the enemy.
The Amalekites, right? They saved the livestock, the best of the cattle and the sheep. He saved King Agag alive. He would not kill all of the enemies of God, the enemies of Israel. And here he kills 85 priests and all of the city of Nob, man, woman, child, infant, ox, donkey, and sheep. He put to the sword. He did to Israel, he did to God's people and to God's Levites that which he refused to do to the enemies of God. He's gone pretty far, hasn't he? He's way away from God at this point. It doesn't get much worse than this. Now, we have this great sin of Saul here, but verse 20, one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priest of the Lord. David said to Abiathar, "I knew on the day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, I've occasioned the death of all the persons of your father's house. Stay with me, do not be afraid, for he who seeks my life seeks your life. With me you shall be in safekeeping." All right, so we have the one son that gets away. And this name, this priest, Abiathar, we're going to keep seeing his name come up. His name is going to be with David for a long, long time. Now, we have the escaped son. He's one of the only priests left, right? He's going to fall under David's protection. He's going to stay with him. Do you see what David does here? In verse 22, he takes the fault. He blames himself for what happened to the priest there at Nob. He said, I knew on that day, he saw Doug there, I knew that he would tell. Doug, we call him Doug the Tattletale. Doug the Tattletale is going to tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of your father's house. Is it David's fault? Well, of course not. David had nothing to do with their death. That's Saul's own sinful, twisted thinking of self-preservation and self-righteousness. Had nothing to do with David. It's not David's fault. David didn't make Saul do anything. It's not David's at all. But that's kind of what we do, isn't it? We see how things play out. That's my fault. I made that happen. What I did caused that person to do their thing. We take responsibility for the actions of others when it's not our responsibility to take. Right? That's what David's done here. He's seen what Saul did and blames himself for Saul's actions. But we see here, that David is human, right? David is one of us. He does the things that we do. So here we have chapter 22. That's all of it. That's the whole chapter. We have David on the run. He's fled from the Philistines. We've seen the madness of Saul grow to an extent that he is attacking his own people and attacking the priests of God and annihilating the city of Nob, even the livestock. Annihilation. That thing which God called Israel to do to the enemies of Israel. Well, Saul has made Israel his enemy, hasn't he? All right, so this is where we stand. David's on the run. He's a fugitive. He's made provision for his mom and dad over in Moab. And, well, the chase continues. That's where it stands. That's where we're going to stop at. We're not going to jump into chapter 23 this week. Do you have any thoughts or questions about chapter 22 here, or any of the other ones that we've covered? But that's where we are. All right, we'll pick up in chapter 23 next week.